Does Disney's live adaptation of an animated classic, Mulan, live up to the hype or give any of it justice? What's up, Sunny fams? Welcome back to another video. My name is Flip, and we are on this journey to catch up to some of our favorite Asian dramas, and we are going to be reviewing Disney's Mulan. Welcome to another segment of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So we're doing this video a little bit differently. Element and I shot our own videos separately, so we saw it at different times and we did not influence each other on our opinions and our final takes on this movie. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I think you're going to like it.
Mulan in a lot of ways represents more than just a live-action adaptation of an originally animated film. It represents an attempt to correct the whitewashing of Asian-inspired stories that typically occur, with Asian actors and actresses voicing the most important roles, and then for the lesser important roles, we had white men and women voicing those roles doing Chinese accents. And yeah, I know, it didn't age well. So did Disney do a good job? Or was this another case of cultural appropriation in another shameless cash grab?
I went into this film with the hopes that we finally have a big budget Hollywood movie that celebrates the Asian community. And that makes me proud. It's an all Asian cast, and so any type of questions or issues about whitewashing, you can throw that out the window. We finally get a big budget movie that showcases Chinese culture in all of its beautiful glory. I mean, this film has some of the biggest names in our generation. Jet Li, Donnie Yen, Gong Li. I mean, Jason Scott Lee is in this movie, guys. And Ming-Na Wen, who makes a cameo, is also in this film. And so the expectations are very, very high. Let's start off with the good. Now, I will say that the film was beautifully shot. The cinematography was breathtaking, the colors were vibrant, the costumes, the weapons, all top-notch. And it's what you would expect in a Hollywood movie, especially coming from Disney. It was lush, it was vibrant, and there were some scenes, especially the night scene, where they upped the level of saturation and it really made the colors pop. It reminded me a little bit of the 300, but not to that extent. But I really appreciated the cinematography and just how all of the colors came together in a very beautiful way. And the story itself is very inspiring, and we all know the story, especially if you are familiar with the animated classic, and even more so if you're familiar with the Chinese poem. But the themes of family, honor, and loyalty run deep in this film. And in this version, they left out the singing to give it a little bit more of a real take.
Aside from the fantastical and mythological elements involving qi and witches, Mulan succeeds in primarily one area: cultural and historical accuracy. The clothing, the culture, and of course the actors were very much culturally appropriate and historically accurate. One of the more pressing concerns I had as an Asian American was whether or not Disney would continue the trend of presenting Asian culture as a caricature of itself. But all of the characters, the costumes, and weapons, by the way, I have a lot of friends who are kung fu practitioners who own many of the weapons that we saw, from the spears to the swords, felt very authentic and genuine. As I watched Donnie Yen perform with the sword and watched the soldiers train with water buckets, I got taken back to all the kung fu movies I had watched growing up showing these very practices. Of course, there were fantastical elements involved, such as Disney and the genre. Nothing felt hyperbolic in nature, and there was a great message to be resounded throughout the entire film. Then there was the cinematography and the use of color. It looked beautiful. Everything looked beautiful. Very colorful, very vibrant, and the shots were incredible. Their use of color in the film was smart and creative. The score was brilliantly utilized. A lot of people will have problems with the lack of mushu or the lack of musical numbers, but I disagree. Musical numbers would have ruined the message and taken away from the story entirely, because the one thing the film does right most of all is try to remain as faithful as possible to the source Chinese poem about Mulan. Of course, there were creative liberties taken, and a lot of set pieces were adapted from the original animated film, such as the avalanche or the lake scene with Mulan trying to take a bath, and a lot of nuanced scenes. And I accept completely that those scenes were put in intentionally and purposefully, specifically for big fans of Mulan, who will recognize such scenes as homages to the original. But overall, I was happy with it. And the final thing, the music. There were no musical numbers. Thank God. It let the story sing and shine all the brighter. But the music is still a standout for me, because while there weren't musical numbers, you got to feel the essence of the original music orchestrally, to lend atmosphere and emotional weight to the scenes on the screen, undistracted by singing and dancing all around. Seeing Mulan come to terms with who she really is, staring down at the sword, and hearing the orchestral swell of the original melody of Reflection, gave it nostalgia, gave it gravitas, and lent itself very well to building the narrative and emotion of these scenes these songs accompanied.
True.
Unfortunately, that's kind of all of the good for me. Now, I know Element might have a little bit more, but that's what stood out to me the most. That's what captivated me the most. But let's get to the bad. If you know me by now, I am very big on action sequences. And if there's going to be martial arts, it better be well shot and it better be well choreographed. And I know that they did a lot of training, extensive martial arts training before they shot this movie and before it went into production. But this is one of the most disappointing things that I found in this movie, especially the opening sequence. The first 5 minutes of this movie is wire work, and it was bad. That's not something I would expect in a big budget Hollywood movie like this. I mean, come on. Take cues from Chinese dramas or historical period films from China and hire some crew that are experts at wire work. This scene in particular, where Mulan is falling off of the roof, it's not even done well. So that left a bad taste in my mouth, especially in the first 5 minutes of the movie. It also felt like I was watching a Jason Bourne version of Mulan. It was so cutty, and this is some of my pet peeves when it comes to martial arts choreography. Show the magic of the form. Show the moves. Show the choreography. Why do you cut into a close-up shot, a medium shot, back to a close-up shot, sweeping slow motions that have no value whatsoever? That is just so frustrating. You have Donnie Yen, for God's sakes. I mean, when he starts doing his forms, show it off. Don't cut to a close-up shot and then a wide-angle shot and then a shot with the people watching him, and then by the time the sequence is over, that's it. Like, I don't get it, and that is just so frustrating. Again, take cues from the legends. You're missing out on the poetry, the balletic movements, the mastery of these movements, and it's just so frustrating to see sequences cut that way. And don't even talk to me about the final fight scene. Just don't. Can somebody call Ang Lee or Zhang Yimou, please? Tell them how to properly shoot a fight scene. Hello, Mr. Ang? Yeah, I think Disney needs a little bit of advice. Can you show them how to properly shoot a fight scene?
There's very little I can say badly about this film. Now, given the hype surrounding the martial arts and the training that was involved, the action was very well done and very well choreographed. But there is one thing I would potentially say was bad, because I can't really say anything about this film that's like bad per se. It's the final fight between Borikhan and Mulan. The fight scene between them was pretty good, and the use of the environment is always a plus in my book, but in the end, there was no epic standoff and no epic fight to the final. It felt anticlimactic. What you expect to be an epic final showdown as they ready their attacks is met with a weird tactical decision by Borikhan, resulting in an otherwise boring defeat. Now, while I imagine there will be some complaints about how the fights went and how they were shot, I have to remind myself that this isn't a kung fu flick, and it's not a typical wuxia. And the underlying message of loyalty, bravery, courage, family, and of course, individuality. But most importantly, it's a Disney film. So I'm not going to pick apart all of the ins and outs that make a great wuxia, because this is not one. In the same way musical numbers would have detracted from the narrative, typical wuxia theatrics would have also detracted. This is a story about a girl who wanted to bring honor to her family in the only way she knew how, and be who she wanted to be, and it succeeded in the end.
Now let's get to the downright ugly. And I mean, this is one of the things that's going to frustrate me the most about films like this. It's about the characters. Like, I just felt like the character development of this movie was very flat. Now, I know the story. Like, we all know the story. If it were someone that's coming into this film without knowing the history or without seeing the animated classic, they would be so confused. I mean, there was no emotional connection with the characters, especially with Mulan and her friends. I had no investment with their stories whatsoever, and I don't know what it was. I think they just cut the movie in chronological order from beginning to middle to end and then shipped it out. Pay $30 to watch this movie. It's gonna be awesome. You had two villains, the witch Shanyang, played by Gong Li, and you have Jason Scott Lee, who plays Borikan. And wow, I hope I pronounced those names right, and if I didn't, I'm sorry. But these two villains had zero chemistry on the screen whatsoever. It just felt like there wasn't enough time to establish any kind of threat, and therefore I did not feel any kind of emotional attachment to the villains, their sense of justice, their purpose in the film. Yeah, I know that they're the bad guys and they're supposed to lose by the end of it, right? So whatever. But even the brotherhood, like the bond between Mulan and her friends, like I didn't even feel that they were close at all. Like, why do they even care about each other? The chemistry between that group did not mesh well, and it's just hard to get emotionally invested with characters and trying to find yourself in a place where you're rooting for them to succeed. And that just did not develop for me. And so it just bothered me all the way to the end. And I hate to say, guys, there were a lot of missed opportunities in terms of character development and just plain old storytelling for this movie. They missed the mark when it came to choreography or how it was shot, as well as the wire work. I mean, hire the right guys and take cues from the legends of Chinese cinema. Please.
Listen, I've got nothing to say about this film that comes off as ugly. It's difficult for me to view anything as beautiful as Mulan as ugly. While some of the pacing felt off in certain parts, I was largely satisfied with how the film played out. And even more so how they portrayed the time period and the character Mulan juxtaposed to the original animated film.
I know the message of the film is pure and holds themes of loyalty, honor, and family. But overall, for the grand scheme of things, I'm gonna have to give Mulan a B-.
So at the end of the day, Mulan to me was a great film. It was very culturally and historically accurate, you know, barring all of the Disney-esque fantastical elements with chi and witches. It had a very important message to convey, and it did that well. At the end of the day, I do feel like this is a stunning success for Asian Americans and Asian-inspired stories as big blockbuster and tentpole pictures. The cast was entirely Asian, and what Mulan does right, it does right really well, and what it does wrong can be easily forgiven for the fact that it's a Disney film. I didn't expect Untamed. I didn't expect Evernight level of, you know, fantastical elements. I didn't expect any of the wuxia that we get typically from that genre. I expected a respectful take on the tale of Mulan and for them to remain culturally and historically accurate with all of its sets and costumes and especially actors. So call me a big softie. I don't know. I find it really hard to kind of hate on a lot of things these days because I try to find joy in everything. And when I find the joy in everything, or when I find the joy in that something, it's really hard for me to latch on to the negative of that something. So with that said, I'm going to give Mulan a big resounding A.
Thank you for being part of the community. If you like this video, leave us a like, share it, because sharing is caring. Subscribe if you haven't already. Tap that bell notification for more videos from us so you're notified when we post them. And I hope you have a great and amazing day. We'll see you next time.